morning, good morning, good morning. We are live. This morning I'm with Mr. Jeff Brown of Alpha Social Media Inc., and we are going to talk about the year's social media in review. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Rob, and how are you doing?
I'm doing well considering all things going on in life, and how are you this morning?
Well, let's just say that there is a abundance of activity happening, and I hate to use the word busy, but it is just like that. Good things are happening, but no free time to be idle. That's for sure.
No, I know. I want to take a moment and dedicate this live broadcast to my Uncle Mac in Tallahassee, Florida. We're thinking about you, and that's all I can say on that front at this point in time. So, I don't know. Life gets in the way sometimes, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and it amazes me that it's constantly moving and changing. I had a participant in one of my programs. Her dad just died, and just out of the blue,
Hmm.
and boom. So stuff happens, and we encourage them, we hug them, we embrace them, we help them to continue to move forward. But life happens.
Yep. Yeah. So let's jump into the biggest story of the year, and that's called what I call the friends or the not friends at Facebook slash Meta, whatever you want to call them. And let's start with the name change. Personally, I don't think changing the name of the parent company does anything to change the brand or the brand's reputation. Thoughts on that one?
Well, you can put a lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig.
Yeah.
Um, Changing a name doesn't change practices. It just doesn't change the policies. It doesn't change a lot of things that people really are not super duper happy with. Now, there are things that on most social networks, things we're happy with, but there are some real key points that even in a name change, it can't fix that.
No, it's so true. And before we went to air, we were talking a little bit. I was watching the news last night, reading social media, and Facebook has now jumped in and trying to make Instagram kid friendly. So, a couple things they've put in is the ability for parents to track their kids' screen time, the ability to monitor what their kids are doing, and we have a mutual friend who unfortunately couldn't be with us here today, Scott Mills. And the bulk of us will tell you that if you start putting in monitoring tools for your kids, they're going to find a way around it. They're smart. What are your thoughts on this whole mess that's come to light in the last day?
In our original conversation, Rob, I originally went to this thing could be used for even greater. Imagine bosses monitoring employee social
Hmm.
media's content, stuff like that. Kids will always find the way around. A lot of parents, a lot of ways, just don't care about their kids, and they're not going to really go for this. Some will, but some won't. But my
Yeah.
biggest concern is now that you've introduced a new technology into the platform, the question is, it can now be exploited. Where will the exploit be? Um, I just think about law enforcement. I think about any of the work that I've done for Crime Stoppers, and I think about uh, what's literally happening with all the security issues. And I'm just thinking that they've now created a way for one individual to monitor another. Imagine a hacker monitoring a victim, for instance. Just the worst case scenario where this could go if someone could get in and then begin to open the door to God knows what on where this could go. And the intentions of the social media network may be somewhat favorable, but at the end of the day, you can't parent, from a phone. You need to parent face to face. You need to be there day to day and having conversations, and then as much as possible being part of your kid's life. If your only monitoring is on a phone, that's kind of sad.
Yeah, I would agree. And we'll take that one more. We know in the last year that Apple has, and it's quasi a social media problem, but I might as well bring it up here. They introduced the ability to scan iCloud. And what they did was they say they're scanning for sexually explicit pictures of underage kids. And they're doing this without a search warrant. And this is the key to me. And I keep saying I'm all for protecting underage kids, but the problem is once this technology gets out there, what's to say they don't use it to search for other things that weren't part of the original mandate? And that's always my concern about things like that, right?
Well, as we continue to enable more and more things, we become more of a, how can I say it? It's almost like we become 1984 all over again, so to speak, in reality. When you think about all the stuff that we're now enabling, and the question is, why do we want it? For instance, now I know when it comes to exploitation of kids and that kind of stuff, we really need to be diligent and catching the bad guys and discouraging that activity. I'm all for that. I mean, I live in an area here where one end of the road to the other end of the road from Halifax to Moncton is called the Highway of Tears, and more young people are abducted than in a lot of other places. And it's sad. Yeah. But at the end of the day, they're opening up the door for things that even bad guys could use to potentially cause harm. This technology can be, once it's out there, it can be used by anybody.
Yeah, it's so true. I just want to stop for a sec. I know we have a number of live listeners, which is great. If you have a comment you want to make during the live show, just insert it into YouTube chat, and I'll bring some of those comments up on screen. So feel free to use that if you want to. That's always a good way to converse and enjoy the live. So the biggest problem going back to this mess is, we need to use these platforms appropriately. And I think we've seen it a little bit with free speech in the last year. It started off, and we did, you, I, and Scott did a show about a year ago where we talked about, it started off with Donald Trump and censoring him. And then it went into the Canadian election where there were posts pulled down because they didn't meet standards. Then we have all the issues with political ads on Facebook and Google now. And it's getting to the point where they're even censoring business owners like myself who cannot post my own domain on the Facebook platform because somebody marked me as spam. And my stuff is so above board, past belief. What do you think about all this censoring going on?
I'm not a fan, period. I mean, we've got social media networks with community standards, and I get why they exist. But it's almost, if I go rule for thee, but not for me kind of deal, where it's the meeting out of how things are done is not equitable in many ways. And so you end up with one group getting penalized over another group, so to speak. You get, the latest kind of chuckle I had was with the new CEO of Twitter. Literally, the first thing out of the gate was, hey, we're going after memes, and we're going to disallow things for private individuals and specific pieces of content. Now, I'm all for making sure that it's safe, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're allowed. We need to have the conversation. Twitter was based on a conversation, and whether I like what the other person says on the other end doesn't make me go home crying. I've got broad shoulders, I can handle it, but so many people literally can't handle the smallest of conversations. And if we're going to go to continually stop people from, freely conversing in whatever format, we may not like what they're saying, but that's where we start to become almost like a police state, so to speak. And social media is well on the way to doing that.
Yeah, we're already there. Actually, it's gotten to the point where you can't even we're in the cancel everything society. We can't even say anything without ruffling. I know from people I've talked to with Fortune 500 companies, HR departments are at the highest end of complaints than they've ever been, because people think they can complain about everything instead of developing what I call big balls, sorry for the language, and just kind of say, this doesn't affect me, so who cares, and let it roll. Now everybody's complaining about everything. And I'm not a fan of that, because what we're actually creating is a more isolated, siloed society. And social media is part of this problem than we ever have before. I was in a conversation last week with a journalist on Twitter. His name is Devin LaRue. He's CBC's journalist in Canada who covers curling. Shout out to Devin. He covers it really well. And he was covering Team Botcher. And they had kicked their third off the team. They said their third was taking time off for personal reasons. The third said, no, I'm not. I was removed from the team. And so Devin co-hosts a YouTube show at 4:00 on Saturdays called the That's Curling Show, which CBC sponsors. And somebody piped up and said, why are you continuing with this drama? Why not just leave it alone? And Devin very politely said, and I should add, I added to the comment and said, by the way, I'm having both sides on separately to tell the story. That's good journalism. And
absolutely.
And we shouldn't be canceling stuff out. I went through it again recently where there was a gentleman in the NHL called Evander Kane, and he's well known. He's gone through some, bad divorce. It's been public. And then what he did was he falsified his vaccine records. So the NHL, in the right way, suspended him for 21 games. And Steve Simmons of The Sun shared the story. A shout out to Steve, and on Twitter. And I commented and said, this was the right decision. And somebody commented and said, the only reason why they suspended Evander was he was Black. The reality of it all was he broke federal laws in both Canada and the US by falsifying vaccine passports. Whether you agree with passports or not, that's the law. He falsified them. I don't care, frankly, and this is going to ruffle some people, if he was Black, white, Chinese, Italian, Yugoslavian, Mexican, and so on. He broke the law. And we need to stop on social media quantifying everybody by race, by where they're from, and look at what we're actually talking about.
Yeah, we need to start treating people just like people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big issue. Let's jump into Twitter. Jack Dorsey. He decided in his whim he was going to step down. I don't believe he was pushed out. He owned that company. He grew it. He's also the co-founder of Square. And anybody that follows Jack knows he's full into cryptocurrency as well, which isn't my choice, but that's up to Jack. Do you think he was pushed out? And I'm not sure I like where this is going, but your thoughts?
Well, at the end of the day, we weren't there. We don't know. It was Twitter has by the way, Twitter's my favorite social network.
Mine too.
It has had challenges, the product releases, failures, more releases. Some things worked, some things didn't, and it was time for, I would say, a new head at the helm. Anyhow, because Twitter really, I would say, needed a change. Parag is probably not super duper crazy about his first day out on the job, but he's right that Twitter does need to advance. It needs to get more aggressive in the social media platform, and maybe hopefully more aggressive in going back to some of his grassroots as to why Twitter really started. One of the things that I really enjoy about Twitter is the conversations with people. Regardless of what I think, what they think, I enjoy the conversation. It would be nice to get back to someone at the helm leading that, and not, really focused on making sure that they don't upset one political party over another or one group over another. it's time to get back to the conversation, because there's a lot of great people out there that we haven't had a chance to talk with or meet, and I look forward to that part.
No question about it. Twitter's all about the conversation, and you and I both know the best way to manage Twitter is to get something to manage it. I have, in the last couple months, gone back to an old friend called TweetDeck on my PC. So I'm using TweetDeck, and I'm managing it with Twitter lists. And what I usually do is, honestly, I throw Twitter and LinkedIn up, and I'll get to LinkedIn in a moment, up on the screen all day, and I just kind of let them run. And that's kind of the way I manage Twitter. So I think it's really important. I also, while we're talking about changes, I don't know if you caught, and I forget the gentleman's name, so for listeners, I'm really sorry. Facebook just changed the head of their messaging department. A Facebook Messenger just left as well. So Facebook's also going through some internal management changes. Interesting.
Yeah, and there was another thing that's new and breaking in Twitter is the fact that these verified accounts, and I've got a good buddy in Fall River named Pat, and he will probably thank his lucky stars that he did not get verified, because there are now scams directly pointed at Twitter users that have been verified. We've noticed that Twitter has been pulling some of these verifications down, but literally scammers are sending them phishing schemes trying to get logins. They're specifically targeting people that are verified. Yeah. And so that's late in breaking. And just if you've been verified, you need to watch what communication comes your way, and don't reveal your information.
Yeah, I think the way to stop some of these scams, and I hate to say it, is to turn 2FA on. I like to do 2FA with the Google Authenticator app. So that's the way I run mine, but you can run the Microsoft one, which I actually do for Microsoft services. Or the other choice is go get an YubiKey. But if you're going to go to an YubiKey, get a couple of them. Don't just get one. And frankly, use a password manager. And I've got a guest coming on in the new year, Ritesh, who's a well-known security expert in Canada. He's been on national TV shows, and we're actually going to sit down and break down what you should do for security. And social media is part of that. And people need to start getting serious and saying, okay, how do I protect my accounts? Right?
Absolutely. And I saw an interesting video on 2FA, and it's how it's used, because we know a certain network that shall remain nameless that begins with a G is doing a lot of two-factor authentication within their own app. I like to keep 2FA with different parties. In other words, you've got your social network, and you've got a third-party authenticator, and you're not using that social network's method of authentication. That way you keep everybody out of the loop, so to speak. Because I'm starting to notice now when I do use the authenticator, begins with a G, they're going time, web browser, location. They're tracking a lot of information. And so they're beginning to put every device together that you are connecting to that specific account, for example. So a little bit of wisdom. I love two-factor authentication, but you need to be smart in how you're using it nowadays so that they're not tracking the living daylights out of you and your devices.
Yeah, and if you're all able to do it, and you have other options besides text messaging, two-factor authentication, I would suggest you use something besides text messaging, because SIM cards can be stolen, spoofed, obtained, whatever you want to call it. And text messaging is an old way of doing things. And I would really suggest if you can move away from that, please do. Like if you have the option. Sometimes you don't have the option, and it's better than nothing. But if you have the option, move away.
And a lot of people I see are moving away from text, and they're going to platforms like Signal, for instance.
Yep. Signal is actually my default SMS Messenger on my phone because it's encrypted. And then for people that aren't Signal members, it will just let you communicate regularly. So there's more of that. And the big one that's taking a hit in all this, of course, is WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is part of the monster Facebook ecosystem. And a lot of people in Europe actually prefer Telegram, which I like for if you got to send somebody a quick file, Telegram is by far the way to go. It makes it easy. It's easy peasy, and it works well. And a lot of Eastern Europe is all Telegram. So it's really interesting watching that breakdown. Let's jump into social media control. And by that, I mean companies like China, companies like the Middle East. I was talking to a good friend's brother the other day, and he couldn't communicate with a friend of his in Saudi Arabia for about a couple of weeks, and there was some concern there. And the reason I mention it is these countries turn on and off social media like we turn on and off a tap, depending on the mood they're in. And they're really trying to control what their people see. And the internal dissidents are always finding ways around it. Will that ever end? Like, honestly?
No, it won't. And VPNs will become even more important to skirt these iron curtains, we'll say, to keep the information coming out. Because at the end of the day, not every country is like Canada. Honest to goodness, some countries are better. Some countries are really repressed, and their people are looking for help. So they want to reach out and get the stories out that are literally happening in their countries. And a VPN and certain specific social media apps that aren't going to be blocked by the wall, for instance, can be the way to get the news out.
Yeah, and one of those examples going on right now, if anybody's been following the story with the Chinese tennis player in China, and that one's all over social media, and she had a video call with the International Olympic Committee a couple of weeks ago to say, "Oh, I'm fine. There's nothing going on." Well, you know, anybody knows the Winter Olympics are in China in 2 months. So why would the International Olympic Committee cut their own throat off and say, "Oh, we think this is bad," when it could cost them billions of dollars? And it's gotten to the point where, because of social media and other things, the U.S. has taken a very strong approach that they're not sending any diplomats to watch the Chinese Olympics. So, you know, there's another example of a story where a government is still trying to control social media to the West, and people just aren't buying that one, honestly.
It's a whole can of worms. What do? Canada's in the process of deciding whether they're going to send them all or not.
Yeah.
But you could look at it different ways. You could have them all walk in with specific T-shirts with a specific saying on it, for instance, that would get the message across. I am not good with countries repressing groups of people. That's just not cool in any book. And so for them to act like nothing's happening, that everything's fine while people are literally suffering, that is not cool at all. So it is a can of worms that doesn't have an easy solution. I saw three people on the news last night talking about it, and trying to, in some ways, kind of put the thing off to the side. Maybe there's a bigger picture. Another person said, let's deal with it right now. I mean, there's a lot going on. There's no easy solution. And at the end of the day, these are people in communities that I would love to have conversations with, and I can't because they're just not available, we'll say.
Yeah, I would agree with you. So let's jump to one of my favorite networks lately, and that's LinkedIn. So I'm going to disclaimer here. Those who have been kind of following me around the social space might know I'm the co-admin of a new Facebook product community. And we have, as we're looking this morning, just over 8,000 people in that community. It's a combination of people that LinkedIn invited and that myself and my co-admin, Courtney Robertson, shout out to Courtney, invited. And we're growing that community. And LinkedIn, for those who don't know, is owned by Microsoft. And one reason why it's taking off is LinkedIn is trying to regrow some of their communities the right way and get away from all the spammy stuff, knowing what Facebook's doing on the other side. What are your thoughts on that and how that approach is going?
The simple fact that LinkedIn is now going to community, that's one of the things that I have been literally hitting in all my social media training when I train business. Build community around your business.
Yep.
And when I see a network really focusing on really building community, that is a real big feather in their hat, so to speak, a really great bonus that it looks good on LinkedIn. And that's a very smart move. And I think they're going to really benefit from really changing some of the impression that people may have about LinkedIn as far as the spam, as far as some of the things that LinkedIn's used for that it shouldn't be used for example, that remain nameless. LinkedIn is heading in the right direction on building community, supporting community, really encouraging engagement. I think they're doing a great job. And that's where Facebook is heading in the other direction, for instance. And I think that LinkedIn's going to benefit from that.
Yeah, and the other thing they did recently last month is they opened up LinkedIn Live to a whole pile of more people. So that's starting to happen too. So they're starting to say, okay, let's move it along with our platform and let's keep the conversation going. And that's the biggest thing. I mean, I don't care what the platform is, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, whether it's LinkedIn, we all wake up to the messages, oh, you just connected with me. Here's a list of the 20 million services I offer. Let's chat. And
Yeah.
I always say to people, really, and I'll tell you, that goes in my unconnect with list or unfollow list or unchat with list quicker than possibly happen. And they obviously must be working or they wouldn't keep doing it. And then the other one that's even more prevalent on Facebook is the old, what I call pretty woman syndrome scam. So somebody puts a post of a pretty woman up and you look at her profile and all that is there is a link to sexual related sites and it's click here and, oh, I want to be your friend. Yeah, I'm sure you do. And you don't even know what's behind that photo, that picture, that person. And honestly, people just need to wake up. And the reason these scams keep going over and over and over again is they're actually working.
Yeah. And that's a sad statement on human nature, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Let's jump into another favorite subject of mine, TikTok. We all know, if you know anything about the ownership of TikTok, it's partially owned by the Chinese government. They are very censor related, but there's a lot of influencers making all kinds of money off that site. And what's your thoughts on TikTok as a platform?
You and I have discussed this for quite a few years. The fact that who owns it is a big, major statement, but there is still some good coming out of this. I see a lot of people creating great videos with great appeal and great usefulness, despite the fact that a certain country owns it. And I do see that it's wherever the bodies are, that's where business has to go. And TikTok is literally becoming a reality that people really can't ignore. And yet, at the end of the day, if you're as a business, you're going to go there, you have to create a viable raison d'etre, reason to be there, so that your brand can benefit from there. But the fact that it's and it all comes down to, again, have the conversation we lean into, it's rented land. You don't own it. And so one moment, TikTok could be good. Next moment, maybe the next president of the United States says, hey, none of this. Cut her right off. She's gone. And that's where...
the problem with doing that is it's back to the whole censorship problem again, right? It's like we don't want censorship on social media, but then we say, oh, it's okay that the government censors. It's the same age-old problem, right? We're back to that whole how do I how do I censor? How do I control? How do I do this? And if anybody out there thinks that North American or European governments do not censor, they have a rude awakening. What typically the difference is, we elect our leaders, the Chinese don't. They have what I call quasi elections. So they perceive they're electing their leaders, but they really don't. Russia's the same way. And then once these governments get in power, and I don't care if it's in China, the US, and Canada, they basically do what they want anyway, right? So
yeah, they pretty much they're more similar. When I think about the different parties, it's just a different shades of the same color kind of deal. Yep. In many ways, that they have not lately, in my mind, proven that they're that distinct enough that the policies they have won't be a continuation of one government from the one party from the other party. I'm somewhat of a skeptic right now at the moment.
Me too. And then the big company around, which you alluded to earlier in the chat, about the G word. And those who don't know, the G word stands for Google/Alphabet. And it's funny, they haven't really ventured into the social media space since they closed down Google+. They've got all kinds of other business offerings, but they haven't entered back in. And they're, as far as I'm concerned, their last two good entries in that space were when they bought what's now Google Photos, which came out of Picasa, and when they bought YouTube. And that's going back, probably 14 years. And I remember when the two were disconnected, because my business YouTube account is actually separate, because it was a legacy account brought forward. But Google has never done well in this space when they've actually developed something themselves. And the question becomes, is Google poised to buy something? Or because of all the antitrust competition and regulation going on, is it just space that they're going to stay away from?
Well, one of the things I've noticed over Google for many years is they've always made things way too complicated. I remember Google Wave. It's a great product. Loved it. It was one of the first products where you could literally co-author documents simultaneously online. Great ideas, but the technology was really too tough for the average person. Now, Google has done a great job, I'll give it to them, at Google Workspace, keeping their products really simple, user-friendly, and easy to use. They've done a great job there. But when it comes to a social network, they have really, really struggled to get anything rolling that gets general acceptance. And that's always been one of the issues that Google has had. I mean, they make great Office apps, but when it comes to social networking applications, they've really struggled. They've not really hit it off. If anything, probably maybe their best bet is to buy something that's already working, that already has broad acceptance. Maybe Google should buy Twitter.
Oh, I was thinking worse. Maybe she should buy Facebook, but that's not going to happen.
You don't want to buy a sinking ship.
No. But it's interesting, and I don't think Twitter's up for sale. Like, I really don't. They've done some things. They have a new $4.99 Canadian a month plan that gets you some extra features. They're doing really well with Twitter Spaces. So much so that I no longer have Clubhouse on my phone. Clubhouse was a dead idea from the start, because you knew the minute they want separate audio, all the big networks were going to import it. I've been on some WordPress Twitter Spaces chats. They're really fun, actually. You now have Facebook, who's in the process of entering into podcasting. So in the US, not available in Canada and in Europe yet, you can actually share your podcast in a podcast RSS feed right to Facebook now. So there's some of that going on. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And what these small companies don't get is the minute they develop something, one of the big companies gobbles them up somewhere.
Yeah, and that's happening more than not, because there's a lot of companies. You and I've had over the last year have had so many conversations around how many companies have been bought up by bigger tech companies to literally get what they do. And it's just amazing. Will we end up with just a few companies owning everything? That becomes the question.
Yeah, and I think the company that's been poised for buyout for a couple of years is Snapchat. I really do. I don't use them. They're mostly a kid's playground per se, but if that's your market, then you have to go after it. And I know Facebook in Snapchat's infancy offered them money before they really put a lot of effort into Facebook Messenger. So I think they're poised to be bought. I don't think they're as big a player as they were a couple years ago. Nobody's talking about them. And that's the problem with this stuff. What people don't realize, if you have a group of 50 friends and they move networks, guess what? You're moving networks.
Absolutely. And that's the thing that any social network has to watch out for, is that I remember years and years and years and years ago when I was a young lad, we used to go bar hopping.
Yep.
And one month, one bar would be the place. The next, you could go next week and be like dead as a doornail. Nobody's there because the crowd had moved. And this definitely applies to social networks. I mean, literally, if Facebook doesn't smarten up, it could literally be a ghost town. Now, sure, it has a lot of bodies, and people are kind of get in the habit of using it. But as something bigger and better and shinier comes along, people's loyalty to Facebook is very questionable. They could literally make that jump.
Yeah, the only thing that really keeps me on Facebook these days is A, sharing my podcasts, which I have to do a workaround for, and B, we have an endless family messenger chat that goes on all day, every day. And I could actually stay totally off the platform and just sit on Messenger and I'd probably be happier. So I'm not there, and I haven't been there for months. I mean, I have family complaining at me that I don't share pictures or other stuff. And I say, I do have a personal website. You can go here. And they're like, I don't want to. And I said, well, that's your loss, because I don't want to sit with the Facebook privacy mess. I mean, I'm not even running a Facebook pixel on my website, because if you can't run ads to your domain, why would you? Like, think about it, right?
Yeah, that all comes back to our conversation we started about literally censorship. And I've known you work for, good heavens, Rob, we've gone back a long time. And
over 10 years.
You're about as controversial as I just can't imagine. And now you can't even post anything to your domain, and you can't even get help. I mean, one of the things that I really dislike about Facebook is if you have a need, there's nobody to call. There's no email. A lot of the help articles are circular references to the same thing. So if you can't find a solution there, and if you try to go and these Facebook groups and talk to a Facebook person, there's a whole bunch of spam in there where people are trying to trick you to go to somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so the whole system is literally falling apart.
Yeah, I'll share with a story that goes back about 8 years now. I had an ex who played Facebook games, and she used to buy extra credit for those games on her credit card. And Facebook actually threatened to shut down her Facebook account for breaking the terms of service of the game. And she said to them, wait a minute here. I'm doing exactly the way you set the system out to be. And that's the problem with it. They can at whim say, we're not gonna do this and feed you one way. And then when they're done with you, they just kind of spit you out like you're yesterday's trash, instead of saying, wait a minute, we did set this up this way, so why is it happening? And that stuff is just getting worse and worse by the day. The algorithm I can't even figure out anymore. It's gotten that bad. Like, it used to be like Facebook pages are basically useless now. Groups are almost useless now. If you're not paying for ads, trying to get traffic to a post on the Facebook platform is impossible. It's just gotten that bad.
let's put some stuff out to the listeners and stuff that works. Now,
Yep. Go ahead.
I continually harp on my workplace education participants, build a community around your business. Don't worry about numbers, worry about working and adding great people
Mhm.
to your community because they're the ones that are going to like and share and comment. But not only that, you really got to start thinking very heavily about um, how you build your post. What do you want out of it? Is it clear? Does the person that's looking at it understand what you're presenting before them? And so the simple idea that, hey, I haven't posted in a while, I better put something up there doesn't cut it anymore. It may be very much not your brand, and the community is looking for certain things around what you're doing. And so if you're not going into that direction, then your voice becomes diluted. And
Yep.
so go ahead, Rob.
And think about how you do it. And by that I mean maybe a written post isn't the only way. Maybe doing something like we're doing now, a live that we're streaming to multiple platforms. A live that when I'm done, I'm actually going to repurpose the audio into my podcast feed. Let's think about doing that, doing voice. Think about doing video. Think about if somebody posts they've got a problem, try and help them. But the problem with that is, and I've found that in the Facebook groups, sometimes they're looking for validation and they'll say, tell you to go away. And that doesn't foster community. And try and educate people. And that's the problem. Like, or reach out to somebody you know who you haven't talked to in a while and say, hi, I'm just thinking about you. That
Yeah,
fosters community in a big way. I
absolutely.
I did that this morning. I try and do that every couple of days with 3 or 4 people I haven't talked to in a while, and I'll just send a DM, whether it's on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and said, "Hey, hi, how are you?" And it's not. I'm not looking for a sale. I'm just looking to see how people I care about are. Like,
Yeah.
let's.
The big thing is if you help enough people, your business will take care of itself
Yep.
if you're smart in how you run the thing. But literally, when you think about a social media post example, there's like, share, and comment on it on most of the same networks. If you, and I tell people, your social network is not for you, it's for your community, like, share, and comment, because that's how that thing gets visibility.
Mhm.
And so if you can't put something out that relates to your community, that doesn't help your community, doesn't promote community, for instance, then those are things that aren't going to get shared, and you're going to have a hard time creating visibility in your network. And this is going to be a theme that's going to go across all the platforms, and will have a consistent stickiness to it over time.
Yep.
Everybody's looking for the latest and greatest tricks, but the hard work is building community. The hard work is building relationships with people and customers that will help you run your business, help promote your business, help talk well about your business, for example.
Yep. And one of the things that I'm um, I'm really big on is sharing stuff. So, like for example, when we get off the
Rob, we just lost your audio. And I see we got a question from Laura there too, as well. Okay, thank you for that question, Laura. Great question. Um, the 30 to 65, you're literally covering, um, and I know your business, and you're very much business to customer. With the fact that Facebook pages reach is tanking, that's on any social network that can happen. Instagram is going to give you a little bit more, but again, it's how you build the post. It's how you appeal to the audience. It's how you um,
yeah
get it out to them as to whether they're going to literally like, share, comment, for instance, because that's what gives you visibility. That's what we always want to try to build a post that's going to persuade it, and always have a call to action, regardless of what network you use on. And the big thing is I love my grandfather. He was a smart man. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And on any social network, as you start to build relationships with people, uh, they will help promote you, so to speak, regardless of where you go. And reach is getting hard on all the networks. That's why really you've got to spend, whether it's online, at the grocery store, when you're out with people, it's as a business owner, entrepreneur, it's go time to make somebody smile, make somebody's day, so to speak, so
So
that
true. So true. I mean, 10 years ago, you could take a blog post and throw it on Twitter, and that would translate to thousands of page views. And now it doesn't even put a dent in it. Like,
yeah.
it's things have changed big time.
And we're still going to have to, like, I still believe in ads and doing that, but also you can't live on paid ads. You have to have good content, especially afterward. So if you're going to do an ad, say on Facebook, for instance, your Facebook page, I would like, Laura, you to have 2 to 3 great organic posts to come right after that, so that you're going to capture some of the new folks that are seeing your stuff for the first time, and then really work at making them feel like they've joined a great community, which means bringing value to them. That's not always want to buy a house sale kind of deal, but hey, I'm glad you're in the community. This is kind of what you can learn. And by the way, I'm a business too. And if you need something, I'm there for you. But here's what we can learn together kind of deal. That's kind of like winning the hearts and the minds of people, regardless of what social network. Some of them, like, go ahead, Rob.
And the other thing is, if you're going to run those ads or run those pages and run these campaigns, think about what your analytics are. Most small business owners that I talk to, and I was having a discussion with a friend of mine who's a jewelry store, and I was ramming it into his head again, saying, okay, what are your numbers on Instagram? Oh, I don't know. People like our page. And I always say, that's nice, but how many of those people that liked your photo picked up the phone and called you? How many walked into your store? How many bought from you? And you got to know your numbers, because if you don't know your numbers, Laura, you're shooting blindfolded at a dartboard. And if you've ever tried that, that's almost impossible.
Yeah.
So you got to know analytics, because one of the things analytics will tell you is how you can improve too. It's not just about justifying the current campaign. It's how do you improve in the future? And if you don't have a basis to improve, then you don't have a basis to do it.
It would be like taking a bow and arrow and shooting at a target, but closing your eyes and walking away and never knowing if you hit the bullseye or not. And one of the best pieces of advice I tell people is always have a plan, a purpose, a call to action for every post on every network that you have. That way you have an idea of whether, hey, I hit the bullseye or I didn't. And so, because if someone's viewing your post, and they're reading through it, if you don't have a call to action, they don't know what to do next. They'll go, wow, great post, great information, next. Give them something to do. And it doesn't always have to be want to buy a house. It could be, let's learn more, or what did you think because you want to comment, or let's get the word out and help other people learn this. Have something for them to do that's clearly understandable and actionable. And I'm not a big fan of, let's do 10 things. Give them one thing to do, so to speak, because if you give them 10 things, you will absolutely paralyze them with, what do I do next?
Yeah, and write those posts for your community. Don't write them for you. That's the biggest thing people miss. And it's not just about social media, it's about all marketing. They write the marketing for them, not for who they're trying to serve. Because what you got to remember, Laura, is people can get the information anywhere. Google is the biggest encyclopedia in the world, Google and Wikipedia. And you can go there and search and find out anything you want. And people truly don't buy information anymore. They buy the people they trust, who they want to work with, and who makes their life successful. So that's what you got to think about.
Yeah, and a lot of that evolves around establishing relationships.
Yep.
And literally we're just like going back into time where the corner store owner knew everybody in the block, and they came back to him because he knew them or she knew them by name. knew what they did, what sport they played, their family, all that kind of stuff. We're coming back into that time where literally touch points, personalized matter.
Yeah, I want to touch on one more point too while we're on this. Is one of your questions was what small business is the best return for their time for the age 30 to 65? Truly, all of them. What you have to do is do some research and find out where your customers reside, where they play, where they are, and that will tell you where to put your time. So, for example, for my business, I've talked enough today about Facebook and my issues with Facebook, and I've talked enough, but really, Facebook's not my market. My market is mostly Twitter and LinkedIn anyway. So, does it hurt me? No. At the end of the day, it doesn't hurt my income. It doesn't hurt my bottom line. And that's what you got to realize. You got to drill it down and say, okay, where is your stuff? And Laura posted one other comment saying she got some great info on this, and thanks. It's our pleasure, really. So
yes.
So that's kind of a look at where we are social media this year. Let's take a minute, Jeff. If something was to happen next year and you had a crystal ball and you had some way of making it happen, what would you do?
Well, one thing for sure, I know with the new CEO of Twitter, I think he's going to make an honest effort, despite all the censorship issues potentially forward. He's going to make an effort to make Twitter much more valuable. I would really hone my Twitter skills and really come to a place where you really understand what that network does. I mean, I think of simply explained, Facebook's like a billboard that people stand around and talk about. Twitter's a telephone. Yeah. And who would you talk to? Who would you build that relationship next? Because at the end of the day, businesses don't always need to have customers on Twitter. Twitter could be used for, hey, I need a business mentor and I want someone to speak in my life and I want to make that great connection so that they can give me some really good advice for my business to practically move it forward. I mean, mentorship, I wish there was more of it. And so Twitter would be one of the things that I would really dig into. I would also up my Instagram skills. I would really start to look at ways to do more in that arena. I believe Instagram will, of the two, Facebook and Instagram, will be the one that potentially has a little bit more traction. But at the end of the day, we have to watch what happens at the top. If our friend gets into any more muck and mire with that network, he could literally sink the whole thing. So I'll be very careful, but Instagram would be the one that I would start to focus, because you got to think about bringing new customers, new younger customers into your business that will recognize and grow with your business. And last, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is, I believe, because they're starting to really start making it focus on community. If there's any business to business you would do at all, I would begin to really start thinking about how can I build relationships on LinkedIn that can connect me with great people, and I can create a win for them. They can create a win for me. I love Angie Dixon's expression says she never sits down at a table or a meeting with someone unless there's a win-win for everybody. That's great words of advice. And I think LinkedIn could literally be that. And again, every network, what you get out of it is what you put into it. And so the biggest thing I can say for the coming year is be prepared to put great things into these networks. Get noticed because you're a great business. You're a great solution to problems that people have, and start building a whole lot of like for you, your company, in a community that you're building. Those would be the biggest things I would say to focus on, regardless of whatever social network you really like to use. Really start pouring more into it, especially building relationships. Because I think with the uncertainty of the pandemic and all that kind of stuff, literally we're going to go back to business 101, and numbers won't be a thing. People will. Surrounding yourself with great people in your community to support your business, regardless what happens, I think is going to be critical for success coming in 2022.
No, I would agree with that. The other thing in talking about networks is Look at some unconventional networks, places like Slack, places like Discord, and you say, why do I bring those up? There's all kinds of social media communities on Slack and Discord, and people don't know they're there. And if they serve your target market, that's what matters. And people need to start looking about that. I would certainly double down on LinkedIn. A bit of advice I have on LinkedIn is I have a good friend of mine in Australia. His name is Adam Franklin. He's been on the show and he runs an agency. So he's got a Facebook group. He's active on LinkedIn. If you want to learn about LinkedIn, hit Adam up. Tell him I sent you. He's a great guy, and he puts out a lot of really good content. So, and the other thing I would like to see people do in 2022 is just kind of be careful about what you post and think about others. Like, honestly, think before you push that send button, that post button, and don't get yourself into places that you don't need to get into, because that just creates resentment and it doesn't even help the situation at the end of the day. So that's kind of where I'm at. Hey, Jeff, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you as always. And I hope people actually get a lot out of this discussion that we had. So have an amazing day.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And keep on trucking.
Yeah. And before I let you go, Jeff, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, where is the best place?
The best place to get a hold of me is my email, jeff@workplaceeducation.ca. Simple, easy to remember, and I'm always got my eye on it.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.
Thanks, Rob. Take care.